Okay, hi everyone. I want to continue and talk more about the problem solving. Excuse me. The first thing about the problem solving, especially when you are going to the interview, is they're gonna ask, they're gonna try to evaluate how good your programming skill is. And part of the programming skill that is mechanics. Those are the basic things. And how do you improve that? There's no better way. You have to practice and you have to write code when you got a chance. Especially if you have a hard problem and try to treat it seriously, and when you come up with a good enough solution and ask yourself, is that even possible to make it better? And the last thing, when you figure out a problem, you got a problem solved, or if you have already done a project, and then you may want to do a revisit. You want to take a look on your code again after you have finished that, say, for half month or 1 month, and then when you are revisiting, and then you will identify, for that part of the code, probably I should be able to do that better. By doing some revisiting, and then you are giving yourself another chance to revisit not only the problem but also your solution, and then eventually you will be able to see some possibilities to improve your coding. Okay, the next part, you want to treat all the problem as they are interview problems. And do you know this book? Well, this is kind of a popular book if you are going for the computer sciencey job interviews, and that is the cracking the coding interview. And let me just read one question to you. Uh, the title of this question is sort big file. And the question is, imagine you have a 20 gigabyte file with one string per line. Explain how would you sort the file. So the question is, you have really a lot of the lines in a file. This file is huge. And then you want to sort all the lines. You want to put the lines into a different order, and then how do you do that? And it suggests that this file is really large. If you have this question, either from this kind of book, or if you're on some discussion board and people are sharing some of the interview questions, and you will see a lot of this kind of questions, right? And then when you're seeing this question, and try to think about that a little bit before you see the solution, because the solution they're right here. And if you want to open the book, or if you want to scroll down and see other people's discussion, you are going to see the solution. But how about you just spend a little bit more time and try to think about that? When the people ask you there is a big file, what does that mean? What is the additional expectation they are looking for in your solution? That is, for this question, the point is, if you do not have the whole data set in the memory, how do you do the sorting? Okay, say if you only have 50 values, and then those 50 values are all in the memory, so you don't have to worry about that, and so you can do the sorting. You can do the sorting in the main memory. But if the file is so large, it cannot even be loaded into the main memory. And how do you do that? Think about this. How about we cut the huge file into several chunks? And after we do that, do the sorting of each chunk, we put the sorted chunk into the file space again. The main memory may not be large enough, but for the file space, and you can easily have terabytes of the hard drive space. So the hard drive space is not a big problem, but the main memory is a problem. So we cut the big file into smaller chunks, and then we sort each of the chunk, we write them back into the file. Okay, and then, for example, if you are cutting this file into two chunks, and then you have to do a merge, so you have two chunks, they are both sorted, and then you want to merge two sorted chunks of the file together into only one big file. And then you can apply the trick as we did using the twin cursors. Well, cursor 1 put the cursor 1 on one sorted file, one sorted chunk, and the cursor 2 on another sorted chunk. And then depending on the cursor 1 and cursor 2, which cursor is smaller, and then for the smaller one, you move that line into a final sorted file, and then you move the current cursor down by one, and then you continue this merging process. So depending on which cursor has a smaller value, you move the smaller value to the final sorted version, and then you move down that cursor by one. So eventually you can have that sorted, and you don't need to worry about loading all the data into the main memory, right? So well, this is just a one question that I see on this book. I just randomly open this book and then see this question, and I want to have this discussion with you. And of course, when you're actively preparing and spending the time to see the questions available, the questions people are asked when they're doing the interviews, and you're going to see this kind of question a lot. Well, my recommendation is, well, you want to try to work on those questions on the paper or a whiteboard. Why? Because, well, in the interview, they will bring you to a meeting room with a whiteboard. So you don't have a Jupyter notebook, you don't have any Python interpreter, you are writing code right on a whiteboard. Or in the phone interview, they're going to ask you, hey, we have two tables, and then how do you do this kind of search? And then you have to just speak out your SQL query. Are you able to do that? Well, you don't. Well, that's even worse because you can't really write anything down. You have to speak out your SQL query. So, well, just try to do some practice that if you are away from the computer, are you still able to do the coding? Are you still able to write down the SQL queries? Well, and if you're stuck, and then try to come up with some of the solution, or just go a little bit further toward your goal and see if you can do that. And before you read the solutions, and when you read the solutions, and then you want to make sure that you really understand why the optimal solution is really an optimal solution. Well, and if you have different versions of the solutions, and try to analyze the algorithm and try to convince yourself the optimal solution is really the best considering the running time, for example. Okay, and the next thing, well, I want to show you a couple of the small programming examples. Well, they are not quite data sciencey. However, those are just the small questions people may use for interview, and they are testing if you have the right mechanics, well, about the coding. Well, let's see the first one. We are writing a number guessing game, and we randomly get a number between 0 and 10, and then, well, we are asking the user to guess and guess and guess again. Well, if I'm using the 18 in this example, but for the implementation, I think I'm using the 10. Well, and then the user will start the guessing, and after each guess, and then the program will say, you should try smaller number, or you are trying the bigger number. And eventually, well, the user will say, okay, if that is correct, and then, well, it will end. Or if the user types a 0, it will end. Okay, and then, well, the requirement of this problem is not so hard. But when you are designing this solution, and what should you think about? So the number one thing will be, well, is that a definite loop or a indefinite loop? For a definite loop, we know how many rounds it's going to run, and usually we are using the for loop to handle the definite loops. So in this case, is that a definite loop? So we started from a random number, and then the user will guess and guess and guess. Well, if the user is lucky, and then the user may guess this in the first try, or the user may guess it for multiple times, right? So that is an indefinite loop. And for the indefinite loop, and in Python, you should know it cannot be handled by the for loop. We have to use the while loop. Okay. So the next part, well, we have answered this question. That is, we have to use a while loop. And then, how do you get the random numbers? Well, we can get the random numbers using a random module. Okay. And then, how do we handle the user input? Because the user will type us the number the user is guessing. So we have to have a way to get the user's input. And after that, when do we finish this program? Well, there are two cases. Well, the case one, if the user guessed the number correctly, and then we finish. And number two, if the user gets bored and then the user types a 0, and then that will be a finish as well. So we have to understand there will be two possible axes in this iteration. So we have to build in two possible axes, right? And then, well, there are some of the edge cases we want to test. Well, say if even the user is supposed to type numbers only. Well, if the user types a string, a letter, well, will that fail, or the program will crash? Okay. And then, well, if the user just types the same wrong value again and again and again, what is going to happen, right? So those are all the things you want to consider. Well, even before you start writing the code, you want to consider how you want to design your solution. And as you can see, the solution is not a huge one. It's just maybe 2 dozens of the lines of code. It's not a huge one, but you do have to consider everything. And then, well, if you have to write down this code on the whiteboard, you have to consider all those questions before you write down your solutions, right? Okay, and then let me go down here. Okay, and here, this is another very cool application of the dictionaries. Well, and let me show you what's going on. Well, we are trying to create a fruit dictionary, and then for each of the fruit, and then we have a description. And then we say as long as it is true, and then we are going to try to ask the user to give us a fruit. Well, if the user gives us a fruit, and then we will print the description. So for example, if the user types apple, and then I'm going to say the description about the apple, because apple is a key in the dictionary, and then I have the description of the apple as the value of the key apple. Okay, and then I also try the lime, and then as you say, a lime is a sour green citrus fruit. And then I have the grape. I want to try the grape, and then I have the grape, and the last thing I want to try the peach. And then, well, if you do a lookup, and you will see there's no peach in the dictionary, right? So we have to say we don't have a peach. And then, well, if the user types quit, and then it quits. Okay, so if you are trying to do this program based on a existing dictionary, and then again you want to ask, is that a definite loop or indefinite loop? And then how do we retrieve the information? And then what are the possible ways that we can quit this iteration? So all those are the problems you have to figure out before you start to design your solution. So so we have already talked about the possible designs of this solution, and then it should be a indefinite loop, that's for sure. So it has to be a while loop. And well, there should also be at least one exit. That is when the user types the quit, and then we have to exit. And then how do we exit? You have to figure that out. And eventually, well, you want to finish all the coding here, and then you want to finish all the coding here, and I will show you my answers in the next video. Okay.